My wife passed away suddenly on June 2nd, 2020, from a massive heart attack. Nobody ever asked themselves, what would I do if my significant other was not here tomorrow? I wish I would have asked myself that question. Maybe I would have been more prepared. Anyways, 2 days after she died, I was on my way to do something, and at the last minute, I remembered I forgot my phone. So I went back into the house through the hallway and entered my room, got my phone, crossed back into the hallway, where I froze in my tracks because I smelled my wife's perfume as if she was standing right next to me. I forgot to say I knew my wife for 31 years and had been married for 23 years. So that was the first strange thing. About a week and a half ago, I went and collected my wife's ashes and placed them on a coffee table in the living room. That same day, I had someone answer an ad that I had placed on the OfferUp app. I was selling a lamp and I accepted the person's offer. The guy showed up about 5:30 p.m. and bought the lamp. While he was here, he asked if I was selling anything else, and I replied yes. I have a chandelier hanging up in the back of the garage that's for sale. I got it down and showed him. I also said I have a gas-powered skateboard that I'm selling. It's in the house all boxed up because it's for sale on eBay. Well, he passed on both items. A few hours later, I got a notification on my Instagram page that someone had liked one of the posts, and the person had liked 2 pics I posted, which is not uncommon. I didn't even bother to look at it. The next morning when I got up, I checked that Instagram notification, and that person had liked 2 pics. One was of the skateboard, and the other was of the chandelier. Now those 2 posts are very far apart. In fact, you have to scroll down on my page about 200 pics to get to the chandelier. The person that liked the photo's account was Kerry Mill, which is my wife's maiden name. So I clicked on the account, and one of the people that followed her was her niece. Another person that followed her was a manager at an apartment building that we used to live at. Weird, right? So I searched some of my wife's paperwork looking for the password to her Instagram account, and I found it. So I went to her account, went to settings, and looked at the login activity. The only time that account has been accessed was from our own IP address. What the hell? Next weird thing, last night, about 3 a.m, I'm sitting at my computer in my room, and the dog comes in and stops at the foot of the bed. Looks up like she's getting ready to jump up, but doesn't. Instead, she just sits there staring up at nothing and starts wagging her tail and twisting her head back and forth, like someone's scratching behind her ears. This goes on for about a minute or so. Last thing today, my son was filling out an application for a student grant for school on his phone. When he was done, he scrolled to the bottom of the page to make sure he didn't miss anything. And you know how at the bottom of an app it says either how many people have used this app or when it was used last? Well, at the bottom of the app, it said it was last used on the 31st of December, 1969. That was my wife's birthday. I wish I was making this up, but I'm not. So my boyfriend and I moved into our apartment mid-September. Our building was built in 1926 and served as a hospital under the end of the Second World War. As you can imagine, the place is filled with energy. Being empathic, I feel residual energy as well as living energy. Living energy as in people's emotions in extreme cases, physical sensations, i.e. nausea, headaches, etc. On to the story now. September 11th. My boyfriend and I pull up to the building for the first time to get the keys. While waiting for our appointment time, I was hit with real bad nausea. This being a common thing because of anxiety and stress, I thought nothing of it. Only having packed the bare essentials to hold us until we could move more stuff in, we stayed the first couple nights. About a week passes, and things start disappearing. First, it was my set of keys, then a credit card, then my whole wallet. Knowing damn well we aren't losing our stuff, I decided to sage. Things calmed down for the preceding 2 weeks. One night, my boyfriend and I were watching Poltergeist when Minecraft for the Switch flew from the dresser to the ground about 3 feet away. Breeze? Nope. Closed windows. Waiting to get an answer as to why all this is happening, I turned to the Necrophobic app. Sitting in my room, candles lit, salt circle, crystals, Necrophonic app and some offerings. 10 minutes passed with the app starting to get them adjusted to it. Haley, a near growl says. First spirit sounded promising. Yes, I replied. A soft voice chimes in and says, we wanted to stay. Nothing further happens. Couple days passed and I'm greeted with things moving, scratching on the walls, windows and doors opening and closing, the shower turning on, toilet flushing, and lights turning on. As you've already guessed, the sage pissed them off. In an attempt to reconcile with the dead, I restart the sentence and ask for forgiveness. Only one out of the many forgive us. Every once in a while, he would help us out. For example, yesterday we were up until 4 a.m. and my boyfriend had to get up at 2 p.m. for work. The time is 1:58 p.m. Both of us wake up to a very loud, wake up, in our ears. In my attempts to make friends with the former guests, I have learned a few of their personalities. This one is the most impressive though. And here we are at the present. Currently sitting in the shower typing at 7 a.m. after sleeping 2 hours and waking up to a spatula in the bathroom sink and the usual nausea, which I didn't mention beforehand because I'm not sure where exactly I could fit it in. My boyfriend's grandfather is an antique collector, and one of his interests is dolls. Porcelain to be exact. They picked this up and the previous owner said to be very careful with it because it was special. Completely unfazed by this statement, he didn't ask any further questions. He brought it home with him about 2 weeks ago. The first 3 days were fine, then it stayed in the kitchen. The following day, my boyfriend and I were laying in our room down the hall talking. It was around midnight when suddenly 3 light knocks were heard through the door. We look at each other and from the other side I hear his grandfather say his name. I got up and opened the door while he was getting ready for whatever task his grandfather had in store for him. Upon opening the door, I expected to be brought face to face with him, but no one was there. I closed the door and shrugged it off, but after I closed the door, I could hear footsteps from down the hall. I go out to investigate, but in the distance I can hear both the grandparents snoring. The following day, around the same time, all power to the house was lost and didn't return until 5 or 6 a.m. Throughout that night, only one lamp was on. Don't know how, but occasionally it went out, but for the most part, somehow, it was still being powered. A few more nights go by without anything happening until just a few nights ago. All through the night, there were screams. Not in the house, but right outside. Last night, around 2 or 3 a.m., I was laying down watching videos when my boyfriend sat straight up, rambling gibberish mixed with numbers. I asked him what was wrong and if he was okay. He looked me dead in the eyes, screamed, and threw himself back and continued snoring. I asked him about it earlier today, and he has no memory of it. His grandfather is taking him to the doll shop tomorrow. Hopefully, all things go back to normal. My father passed away recently due to illness. Since then, me, my mother and my brother have had a few odd experiences around the house. All of us have heard footsteps between the hours of 4 to 7 a.m, a time he used to get up and watch TV when he couldn't sleep. Last Thursday, we heard the front door open, but when checking it, saw it was still closed. The day and the time lined up with the time he first returned from hospital. He used a CPAP machine for assisted breathing. This will not work unless you're wearing the mask and making use of it. Not only that, but the final time he went into hospital, the paramedics took it with them. A few days after he passed, my mom could hear it very clearly, coming from his bedroom downstairs. One night when I heard footsteps, I went to investigate. At the bottom of the stairs, there was a strong smell. His smell. His cologne, the smell of his cigarettes, it just smelled of him and it was almost overpowering. Last night, I got curious and I wanted answers. I received an advert for some EMF/EVP detector app. Honestly, at first I was a complete skeptic. I've always believed in the supernatural, but I don't believe apps like that really worked. The EMF spiked to the bottom of the stairs where I'd had a previous experience. I then took it over to his chair and left it sitting there. The EMF went off the charts and it picked up the word angry. I even heard it clearly with the phone turned up. Safe to say, I sprinted upstairs and hid. I thought it might have been something other than my dad, but then I started praying that it wasn't me he was angry with. If he was, I begged forgiveness. But this morning, because it was still troubling me, I told my mum that I thought he'd spoken to me. I put the app back on and left it by his seat again. My mum had enough experiences in the past couple of weeks to not be skeptical. I moved all electronics away from my phone and turned the TV off. The EMF spiked once more, and this time, my half-brother's name came up on screen after we heard what sounded like one of my dad's wheezy breaths. We both went cold and were both immediately covered in goosebumps. I won't reveal the name that came up for the sake of anonymity and whatnot, but the brother that was mentioned was the one who hadn't spoken to him for nearly 30 years. He was the only child he never got to see again before he passed away. I've been experienced the feeling of being watched and felt very uncomfortable in my bedroom, to the point I made my mum and dad switch rooms with me and my sister because I couldn't sleep at night. My sister, who we initially thought had an imaginary friend, but when we talked about it, she gave us some very specific details, which turned out to be about a girl who had died in the area we lived in. She also used to hide in cupboards because she was scared of something. My dad on several occasions would run up to my room because he could smell cigarette smoke in the living room when he sat by the window and my room was directly above the living room. So he thought I was smoking in my room. Other small little things happened, like things going missing, batteries draining super fast, the feeling of being pushed and watched, so we decided to invite my friend's mum over, who was a medium. Not the kind of that announces it to everyone. She kept it to herself. We made sure we didn't tell her or my friend any of these details because we wanted to make sure that we weren't just told what we wanted to hear. We sat down in the living room and straight away she said there were 3 spirits present in the house. We were confused because we only knew about one. She explained there was an elderly woman who was the strongest spirit and she was protecting us. We worked out it must have been our nana. We kept her ashes, so it made sense. She went on to explain that the other 2 spirits were related. One a little girl, and the other was what seemed to be her father. The father was a very angry spirit, and he also smoked heavily, and he didn't like us being in the house. She explained that the little girl was abused by this father figure and would hide in the cupboard. All the pieces were fitting together. She went on to explain that there were 2 portals/gateways in the house, of which the spirits enter and leave, one of them being in the living room and the other being in my old bedroom. She explained that she could close the portals, but she would have to prepare before she could do so. My parents had to leave to go get my little sister from school, so she left as well. My friend stayed as we had plans to go out a little later on, so myself, my younger brother and her was left still talking. Me and my friend were about to go upstairs to get ready to go out, and she screamed in pain and grabbed her arm. When we saw, she had a big scratch right down her arm. Then we heard a noise coming from upstairs as if someone was playing with the radiator, at which point there was the loudest bang that actually scared the living daylights out of us. I was the one voted to go upstairs to check it out. I searched my room to see if anything happened. Then my brother's, and there was nothing. I walked to my mum and dad's room and found every cupboard drawer, every drawer open wide. As soon as I saw it all open, everything slammed shut. I ran out of that room so fast. We all left the house and waited outside in the garden till my parents arrived. We clearly had agitated about something and we didn't want to stay there anymore. A couple of days later, my friend's mum came over to do her thing. My sister stopped talking to her friend. The odd things in the house stopped happening, but I'll never forget about that day. Due to a roommate bailing out on our lease, I was forced to shack up with a buddy of mine and his wife. It was a small 2-bedroom apartment, but he welcomed me with open arms. They had a toddler that the second room was for, but they said she never goes in there and sleeps with them every night, so it was no problem to take the room for my own. A couple of weeks went by with no incident. However, I did notice the room was a good 10 degrees cooler than the rest of the house at all times. No problem, I'll just wrap myself up in the blankets. I've always been a heavy sleeper, so it takes me some time to wake up in the morning as I zombie around for a good hour first. One particular night, I woke out of my sleep and lifted my head up to adjust the pillow. As soon as I did, I noticed something in the far corner of the room. The entire room was lit with moonlight except for one dark silhouette of a human form standing in the corner, staring at me. This figure had no features besides the dark outlining of a broad-shouldered man standing, watching. It may have been my grogginess, but he was very tall as well, with his head almost touching the ceiling. Due to being 90% still asleep, I didn't acknowledge what I had seen and fell back asleep on my newly adjusted pillow. The next morning, as I awoke to a much brighter sunlit room, I remember what I saw last night and the form standing in my room. After a quick glance at the same corner, I shrugged it off as a dream and went on with my life. A couple more months went by with no more shadowy figures staring at me, or at least that I was consciously aware of. I was going to be moving to my new place with my then girlfriend, and we were just waiting for the lease to start. One night during that wait, I encountered the silhouette man one more time. The details of this encounter were exactly the same. I awoke, adjusted my pillow, saw the giant shadow staring at me, thought nothing of it, and drifted off to sleep. Once again, to repeat my encounter to the letter, I woke the next morning remembering what I saw and quickly darted my eyes to the corner. Okay, there has to be something to this. Moving day arrived, and I decided to tell my buddy, who was gracious enough to let me stay, my 2 encounters with the silhouette. His reaction surprised me. Yeah, our daughter doesn't go in there and just points to the room saying, scary man, when she gets close to it. He told me as if it was no big deal. After letting out a sarcastic, now you tell me, we continued with the move. I've never had a ghost experience before or after that. It's my only little talking point to others who are interested in the same paranormal stories as I am. His presence has always stuck in my mind though. I even put him in one of my short horror stories when I first started writing. Of course, that story was fictional. This one is not. This is a story told by my uncle, who's a realtor. In his line of work, he often comes across houses like this that often people have died in, and some linger around. This one, though, had a lasting impression on him because of why it was the way it was. Initially, he told me about the house since we both had a sixth sense. He said there was this haunted house that he was in charge of, and if I wanted to see it, of course I was like, why not? It stoked my interest. But also, I made sure we weren't going in. I'm very superstitious, and have never been attacked before. So I take care not to intrude with the other side even though I get interested. I don't want to cross lines. Didn't want anything to attach to me. When he showed me this house and I saw it, I understand why the grandma felt the way she did. If you have a sixth sense, you'll understand when you see certain locations or places with bad history. You'll feel an off feeling, a darkness even in light, anger, sadness even, negativity and an overall sense of dread. This was what I felt from just staring at the house, and then after, he sent me this. The other day, I was scheduled to show two beautiful Elk Grove homes. One of them looked very familiar. I wasn't sure if it was the exact home I was thinking of. Unfortunately, on this day, my left ankle had been giving me a lot of trouble. You could say I was more concentrated on the sharp pain that runs up my spine with each painstaking step than paying any attention to the homes. Although I was suffering from this pain, I just pressed on with the job, showing these two homes. The first home was a home I told you that looked very familiar, but wasn't sure if it was the right home. As it turned out, it was the home I thought about. It was one of my friend's homes who had let it go into foreclosure a few months earlier. Because of my ankle pain, I didn't venture far into this giant beast. I only stayed in the living room with the client's grandma. We just stood there staring at each other while the rest of the client's family explored the entire home. The home shows very well, but there were lots of visible repairs needed in order to make it livable. There were loose and hanging wires throughout the house and floors that looked like it was damaged from the flood. Although the walls looked new, the home had a dark, creepy and depressing feeling to it. It was not your normal giant, whereas you walked in and you just have this exhilarant vibe of happiness and warmth. The grandma turned and looked at me. With an expressionless and stern face, she said, "This home needs lots of repairs." That was all she said. My client's family couldn't agree more. It wasn't until the next home did the grandma finally open up to me. The grandma slowly said in a low tone, "I like this home more than the last one. That first home gives me the creeps." I couldn't agree more. But to lay this creepy feeling to rest, I tried to justify the reason to the grandma why it felt creepy. I told her it must have just been because that first home was much bigger than the second one. Although I did get a creepy feeling about the first home, I probably chose to ignore the feeling. My hair for once didn't stand up, nor did I have this feeling there was someone lurking around like usual. This time it was more of, where can I get home to rest my foot? Maybe this was the reason why my sixth sense didn't kick in full force. I was more worried about the sharp shooting pain from my ankle than paying attention to the surroundings. However, just letting you all know, I didn't lose my sixth sense, not just yet. Like I said, I did get this creepy, dark and depressing feeling about the house, but my mind was somewhere else. Later on in the evening, I texted my friend and told her I showed her old home to my clients. She asked me how the show went. I told her the grandma said the home was creepy. The next text scared the wits out of me. She said, "Yes, the home is creepy. My late husband passed away in this home." I knew her husband was sick, but I didn't think he died inside the home. She's never mentioned it to me. She called me and told me the whole scary story. She said after he died, she continued to hear him call her name around 1 in the morning, telling her he was hungry. She thought it was her imagination at first. Maybe once or twice hearing her late husband call her name, maybe coincidental. But calling her name every night around 1 a.m. started giving her the creeps. Before her late husband passed away, he was bedridden. He couldn't walk, but could only crawl. After he passed away, she sometimes sees a glimpse of him crawling around the house. Late at night when she was in her room, she could feel and hear him crawl throughout the house, up the stairwells and into the hallway. Since there was a huge gap at the bottom of the bedroom door, she could feel him lay his head down on the floor and peek at her. Now those of you who've had such experience knows the person being haunted will experience a telepathy connection with the spirit. This person will see exactly what the spirit is looking at. While she was in her room, in the back of her head she could feel someone staring at her from underneath the door. Every move she makes, She could see herself from a third person's view. She couldn't shake the feeling off. She got so freaked out, she placed towels under the door every night. She told me she didn't want to tell her son because it would really creep him out. This is the real reason why she decided to let her home go into foreclosure. Paying for the home was not a problem. She could afford it, but she couldn't stand that home any longer. She said she's never been so scared in her life. One of the cons of buying a foreclosed property is that the bank is exempt from disclosing deaths on the property. This is left up to the buyer to do their own due diligence about finding the history of the home. Although foreclosed homes may be sold for under market value, sometimes it's better buying a home from a seller. Sellers are required to disclose deaths on the property within 3 years. However, it is unfortunate. Unexplained phenomena or hauntings are not part of the disclosure package. This is where you may have to rely on your sixth sense. Buyers, beware. This happened around 5 years ago. I had just moved in with my grandma, trying to find some independence, as well as trying to help her be a bit better economically. The house is actually divided into 3 small buildings, so I had one of these just for me, while she and my grandpa used another one. All the 3 buildings are surrounded by a big chain link fence, so it's secured, but you can actually look into the backyard and such. It was my 3rd night there, and my grandparents were out on vacation. I didn't feel secure or comfortable, but I brushed it off as the experience of being independent. To calm myself down a bit, I turned on the light of the bathroom and let the door open before turning off the lights in my bedroom, so I would still have plenty of light, but it wouldn't bother my eyes. I managed to sleep for a few minutes before waking up a bit alarmed. I looked at the window and thought I saw someone standing there, but as soon as I blinked, they were gone. I laid down again and tried sleeping, but I woke up again, and when I looked at the window, I saw someone looking inside. But as soon as I got to turn on the lights, which were right over my bed, they were gone again. I got a bit scared, so I got out of my room and let the dogs in, since I knew that if someone tried to get inside, they would certainly make a lot of noise as they're trained to do so. I also made sure all the doors were locked and checked all the windows, and no one was there. So I felt a bit relieved and went back to my room. Since I didn't have an actual door in my bedroom, it was a cloth only. I had this little baby door that I used to keep my dogs out of the room, so I put it in place and went back to bed. Checking the windows again and turning off all the lights except for the bathroom one. I fell asleep but suddenly woke up again. This time I couldn't move, so I thought it was sleep paralysis. I looked around me and I saw something staring at me from the opening in the bedroom door. I was, to say the least, scared to death. I couldn't move nor make any sound, so I was just getting more desperate each second. I closed my eyes and repeated to myself that this was sleep paralysis over and over to try and calm myself down. When I opened my eyes, it was no longer there. I let out the air in my lungs that I was not aware that I was holding, and realized that I could move at that moment. So I turned around, which was the worst decision I could make, because as soon as I did, I saw this thing looking directly at me. Or well, I felt it looking at me, because it had no eyes, only holes. Its face was inches from me, its mouth open, just tons of black and gooey spikes inside it. I tried to turn around, but it grabbed my neck and pulled me. I screamed and it yelled back. The thing running outside my door and out. I passed out a few seconds later. In the morning, I woke up and thought it was all a bad dream, until I saw the baby door on the floor. I got scared, but tried to think logically, and said to myself that it probably was just the dogs who made it fall, not the thing that I saw, that it was just a coincidence. I left for work to try and have a normal day. While I was working, a friend of mine came and asked me, pretty worried, what had happened to me. I didn't understand this question, so he pointed at the back of my neck. I had 2 long cuts on the back, going from the middle of my neck to my ear. I was shocked, but I said to myself that again, probably it was just my dogs trying to jump on the bed, and since they scratched me, I had a nightmare about it. No big deal, right? Well, when I arrived at home that night, I had my front neighbour, who I've known since I was 3, so pretty trustworthy, come to me a bit shy and looking a bit weird. When I asked him what was going on, he asked me if everything was alright. Once again I was shocked, but asked him what he meant, and I quote his answer. It's just, last night I was having dinner when I heard someone scream pretty loud. I came out and I saw someone running out of your house and into your grandma's place. I thought that maybe something happened to her. I felt the blood draining from my face. They were on vacation and there was no one else out the house. I told him I was fine and went back to my place. I couldn't sleep with the lights off for over 3 months. A lot happened after that. I lived there over a year, but this is the only one where I got physically hurt. A few weeks ago, my partner and I moved into a new luxury apartment with our 2 cats. We live in a major city near the beach. The apartment building was recently renovated, but has had previous tenants, and the land has also been in use for hundreds of years, for various purposes. We're on the 6th floor. The only thing I found in the apartment that belonged to prior tenants were folic acid supplements in the cabinet. Since the very first night we lived here, I've been having a strange experience with an entity. I've had some odd stuff happen before, but nothing quite like this. The first night I was still awake at about 2 in the morning and got up to go to the bathroom. Clear as day, I heard a deep male voice say, "There you are." At first I thought our home was being invaded. That's how human-like and clear the voice was. But then I saw a shadowy entity in the hallway. It was very tall, vaguely humanoid and dark. Sort of like shadow but staticky almost. Pixelated. It seemed to be walking on the ground. I retreated back to the bedroom and got in bed. I saw the entity briefly enter the bedroom. Without opening the door, it just went through the wall and then go back to the hallway. I thought I might have had a waking dream or something. I told my partner about it the next morning, but we both shrugged it off. What's weird is, we were working from home the next day, and I saw it again. Standing in the hallway, still appearing shadowy, but this time in broad daylight. One of my cats who was next to me sat up and looked directly at it, which is what made me turn around to see it. Another cat walked around it the same way it would have walked around a human person. Around 2 or 3 a.m. every night, the entity walks the same pathway down the hallway, into the bedroom, then back through the hallway. During midday, it just sits in the hallway for 15 minutes or so, before disappearing again. It doesn't appear every day, but it does appear every night. Sometimes it speaks. It once asked, "Where are you going?" When I turned around to go back to bed. It will otherwise not interact with me. It's never approached me or left the hallway/bedroom entry. My partner can't see it. The cats continue to interact with it, look at it, and meow at it. I was in 5th grade, sitting on my desktop computer, home alone after school. The desk fit into the little nook in my dining room, so I could look left and see into the living room, but if I was leaning into the computer, there was a wall in the way. I was just playing games or something, and suddenly my front door burst open, and there were shuffling footsteps going into my mom's bedroom. I froze and tried to push myself towards the computer, so if it was an intruder, they couldn't see me behind the wall. After a few seconds of silence, the feeling of a cat rubbed against my leg dangling off the chair, and a loud cat meow surrounded me. Not like a normal meow, but like the sound of an angry cat, and it was super duper loud. I had a cat at my dad's house, so I know what normal cats sound like, but this noise surrounded and echoed in the room rather than just coming from a foot off the ground. I pulled my foot up, looked down, and there was nothing there. I looked, the door was still open, and I just sprinted to my room. My mom was at work, so she called my grandpa to come over and check out the place. I think this was just after we were robbed, so I was extra paranoid about someone intruding. They said the door probably opened from the wind, but there was an enclosed porch on the other side of the door and a second door that opened out rather than in. But since we were robbed, we made sure the doors were locked, so I find it unlikely that the front door was unlocked and somehow just flew open without a breeze. The cat, I never got an explanation for that. We moved into that house not long after the woman who lived there before died. She had 2 cats, I believe. There was a little cat house in the backyard that we never touched. I'm not sure if she died in the house or not, but other weird things have happened. One time, I was sleeping, and the karaoke machine in my room randomly turned on to full volume. Other nights, I would hear pots and pans banging around in the kitchen, which was attached to my room. There was a plaque in the kitchen that said Jean's room and never got taken down. Jean was the old lady that lived there before. For a good bit of my childhood, we lived in Charleston, South Carolina. Our neighborhood and house were not too old. The house was built in the mid-90s. However, the neighborhood was built on the grounds of an old slave plantation. This, I believe, is what led to experiences by my sisters and I. I don't have one cohesive story, but more a list of things we saw, heard, or felt. Our dad was in the military, so he'd be gone on trips all the time. When he'd get home, usually at night, we could hear him come up the steps and he'd open our doors, check on us, and then leave. One night, I heard what sounded like his boots on the hardwood flooring, but my door didn't open. I didn't think much. The next morning, I asked my mom when Dad got home, and she assured me he wouldn't be home for 3 more days. So I figured I was hearing things. The weird thing is, my 2 older sisters said they heard it too. This went on for a few nights randomly over a long period of time, but rarely whenever Dad was home. There was one night that I remember vividly. I heard the sound clear as day, boots walking up the steps and on the hardwood floor. Dad had been gone for a few weeks, so I rushed up to see him. I opened my door, and there was nobody there. One of my sister's rooms was beside mine. She heard footsteps and opened her door, thinking Dad was home too, but just found me standing there confused. Our older sister, who was at the end of the hall, then came out because she woke up to the footsteps and then heard us whispering. We were now convinced we had a ghost in the house. Our mom, whose bedroom was downstairs, woke up and yelled at us from the foyer because she thought we were stomping around upstairs. We told her what happened, and she said it was just the floor popping. Something not uncommon for hardwood flooring. We all went back to bed, and here's the kicker. Once we had closed our doors, the footsteps went back down the hall and down the steps. Again, clear as day. I didn't sleep anymore that night. We never saw anything, but always heard these phantom steps. Up the stairs, down the hall, and then back. From all 3 of us at night to individuals when we were home alone. It became a joke in the house that we did have a ghost, and it was the ghost of someone from the plantation. Nothing ever seemed angry or evil, just off. Perhaps someone's just checking on the kids. This was when I lived in Charleston, South Carolina, on the grounds of an old plantation. I had a toy double-barrel shotgun. It was modelled after the old side-by-side type. 2 hammers, 2 triggers. When the triggers were pulled, it'd make a shooting sound. If held down, the shooting would go on. One night while sleeping, I hear the shooting sound, muffled, coming from my closet. I opened my toy chest where the gun was and took it out. As soon as I touched it, it stopped. I figured something had shifted and was pulling the trigger on the chest, so I laid it on top and went back to bed. A few minutes later, it started again. Now I was getting scared. I took it out and removed the batteries, thinking maybe there was something wrong with the wiring. Left it and went back to bed. Now I woke up again to the sound of clicking from the closet. I looked in and the two hammers were clicking back and firing repeatedly. This was my nope moment, and I threw the gun away. After telling my dad, he simply said it must have been broken. For this one, I'd like to add that these take place in the early 2000s, so the show, A Haunting, was big at the time. One of my sisters and I were in my parents' room watching a sad show on an old TV. In the show, the woman was talking about how she was in her bed watching TV before going to sleep. Her lamp then flickered 3 times, and the TV cut to a blue screen. As if on cue, my parents' bedroom light flickered once, and the TV cut to blue, then static, then normal. My sister and I ran out yelling. Our mom didn't believe us, but we assured each other it did happen. Took that as the ghost trying to communicate, maybe. Those were the 2 big ones involving me. We had other experiences as well. My older sister had a weird door that could lock from the outside. She had problems where the door was always locking and she'd be trapped in a room. Our mother tried very hard on our old mechanical keyboard on the computer upstairs. You could hear it downstairs because it was so loud. Scary thing is, we'd hear the sound while she was at work, with nobody upstairs. We had a radio in the living room that liked to turn on at the most random times. To turn it on, you had to hit a power button on it. No remote. Lastly, the access to one of the attics was a door in my bathroom. We stored some of my toys there. I always hated opening it up because I would always have the feeling of being watched and just dreading it. Weird sensation for a kid. That sums up my experiences I can remember, or what my sisters have shared. We believe they were 2 different ghosts, as when we heard the footsteps, we were never scared for some reason. It's made me a firm believer in ghosts, and it wasn't until recently that our mom has said she believed the house to be haunted. Our dad always denies it. So I was having an argument with my significant other, and I started yelling at him. When I got angry, I shouted that I was going to leave him. The first time I did this, my door slammed shut in the bedroom, and I thought it must have been a draft or something, and we laughed, thinking it was dramatic effect. And he went on to say the vibrations of my voice must have been so bad, the door couldn't take it. Anyway, since then we've bickered like any other couple. To fix the draft, we got stuff installed around all the windows and inside the house. A few weeks later, once again I'm in my room arguing with him, and I tell him again that if he doesn't change, I'll leave and move back to my parents' house. This time I wasn't shouting. As soon as I said it, both my wardrobe doors flung open, and we both got scared. Again, if we put it down to draft, even though we both know this has been fixed. Moving on from that one night, I was having a nightmare and woke up in my sleep in the middle of the night, only to find straight after I woke, my significant other was also having a nightmare, and he accidentally scratched me while he grunted and grit his teeth, arching his back backwards and trying to breathe. I thought he was having a seizure, so I turned on the light only to see that once again the doors were open in the room, both door and wardrobe. My significant other woke immediately after, and the only thing he said in a slurred speech was, "It went out the window." The odd thing is, he doesn't remember any of it. He only remembers that he had a nightmare and can't remember what about. He only remembers me looking at him terrified in the middle of the night. As religious people, my dad's side of the family and I are strong believers in ghosts, demons, jinn, etc., except my mom, who grew up in America in a non-religious household with a different cultural background. This is a collection of instances that happened to us in this condo. When I was about 16, 2 years ago, my dad's side of the family, around 13 of us, stayed in a beach condo in Alexandria, Egypt, where they live. These condos are known for being completely vacant the whole year and only being rented out for the 3 months of summer. In our culture, spirits inhabit empty places where they can live how they want, and this apartment was no different. We had rented it for 5 weeks up front, no refund. This is very expensive, and the main reason we didn't pack our bags and book it. After a couple of weeks, I assumed the spirits became a little restless. First, one of my aunts, a cousin who's a year younger than me, and I started saying how we couldn't look in the mirrors in the main bathroom. They said they would see smoke coming out of their eyes and other mind tricks, and personally, I saw my eyes go black and truly felt that I was looking at someone who wasn't myself. Little things like that would start happening, like my uncle would complain about someone sitting at the foot of his bed when he's sleeping. No one would dare to get very angry when woken up. My aunt would feel someone pulling her hair, and doors would start slamming. The first time we interacted with them, however, was when my uncle knocked on the bathroom door and a woman clearly said, "I'm in here," and his name, but the light inside was off. There was only a window to the elevator chute in that bathroom, so it was completely pitch black at night if the light isn't on. He hurriedly grabbed me and asked if anyone was in there. I counted everyone twice at his request, insisting it was empty and to just open the door. He refused, but I had gotten impatient myself opening it for him to find it empty. I'd never seen him scared my entire life, and he sure as hell didn't use the bathroom. I was in that same bathroom one morning, and a woman's voice started talking to me in rapidly fast Arabic. I couldn't understand and screamed my name. Looking back, I should have been terrified, but I was only left confused sitting on the toilet, wondering what was she trying to tell me. This experience is the one that made us all confess to each other on the 4th week that we'd been seeing and hearing. There were a lot of children in our family, and one of my cousins who was around 10 would take her mom's iPhone and take pictures of her little sister, who was around 5. My aunt, the mother of these two, regularly goes through her pictures, just in case one of them has a picture of someone changing, a house full of girls who share a room, and her husband usually goes through her phone. This time, she was looking through her trash folder and came across this picture that stopped her in her tracks. She ran from the bedroom the picture was taken into the main living room, where we'd all been sitting and chatting, to show us a picture of what was supposed to be her youngest daughter, mangled into at least 5 different faces, where her own was supposed to be. It wasn't a pano, but we thought maybe her oldest had screenshot a pano gone wrong, as other iPhone users know happens often. Not only could we not find a pano version anywhere, I tried recreating that same glitch for half an hour to not get anything even close. She removed the picture from her trash to find an explanation and refused to give either daughter her phone. 2 days later, neither daughter had been allowed and hadn't taken the phone. We were looking for the picture to show someone else and couldn't find it. She looked in the trash folder to see it sitting buried way before it was even taken. This kept repeatedly happening to every phone the picture had been sent to, and I even put it in my Google Photos, only for it to be deleted again and again. One morning, my grandma woke me up to someone shoving their finger in her mouth and wiggling it around. Her eyes shot awake, but no one was even in the room with her. This one is the scariest encounter in that condo. My mom, a total non-believer, had been on her own bed in only a towel after a shower, combing her hair, and had a clear view of the frosted glass. None of us had told her what had been going on with the rest of us, because she slept alone in a room with my younger sister, and knew she would just brush it off. It's around 8 p.m. My whole family had just finished dinner together and were all in close proximity to the main bathroom, which was next to my mom's bedroom, both in clear view of the dining table. All the kids were in a bedroom at the other end of the condo, and my uncle was standing in the middle of this area with his back to my mom's bedroom door, talking to my oldest aunt who was facing him in the door. My aunt sees this long door handle to my mom's room slowly turn down, and the door opens just a crack. In order to close this door properly, you had to slam it shut. So to open this handle, you need force. My aunt yells at me to check on my mom, not telling me why. I open the door to scold my mom for not closing it properly, when she looks at me like she's going to start screaming and crying. She tells me that she heard the door open and then saw the figure of a small child in the frosted glass just watching her. To say the least, she's a believer now. We stayed the whole 5 weeks, each day getting worse and worse by the last 2 weeks. We're never returning to that place again, no matter how cheap. For context, I work in the offshore oil and gas industry, or oil field, and I work and live out in Asia. Here where I'm at, oil and gas extraction quite often is done out at sea, often many miles away from shore. Often this is done by building large steel structures we call platforms, with legs that sit on the seabed, and working platforms and decks above sea level to house machinery. The wellheads sometimes need crew quarters. Typically, they'll have a large mother platform, with living quarters for upwards of 100 people, with small unmanned satellite platforms nearby that link back to the mother platform by undersea pipeline. Usually, nobody stays at the unmanned satellites. They day trip from the mother platform instead. So most of the time, the unmanned satellites are truly bereft of human presence. It's on one of these unmanned satellite platforms that our story takes place. I was part of a crew sent to a satellite platform to perform some well servicing work maybe 10 years ago. Our crew consisted of 20 guys, 10 day, 10 night, and there were another 3 guys from the mother platform. We'll call them the production crew, staying on the satellite with us. Since there wasn't any real accommodations at the satellite, my crew were all staying on board a nearby supply boat. The production guys would day/night trip over from the nearby mother platform, about a 1-hour boat ride away. Oh, and this platform was close to 30 years old, showing its age. By the time I got on location, the project was already a month in progress. We'd had numerous problems so far. Equipment failures, breakdowns, stuff not going to plan, etc., which was rather more than the usual. Our mechanic and electrician were both pissed off. Stuff that they'd fixed with brand new spare parts were breaking again. Things that shouldn't break down, broke down, etc. The job itself was going rather poorly as well. All in, an unusual streak of very, very bad luck. We really didn't think much of it at first. We were so busy with the work, when one morning, the supervisor was apologising to one of the production guys about the latest breakdown, when the guy left and said that it was normal for this platform. Every contractor, every crew who has ever worked on this particular platform always had massive streaks of bad luck there. Weird, huh? Anyways, that's just the mild stuff. What really takes things up several notches happened at night. I was on the night shift crew. There was a smoking area at the lowest deck of the platform, just above the sea, next to the toilet. There was an older guy, let's call him Uncle Jack, who usually took his smoke breaks alone. The rest of us would go down in 2s or 3s, but Uncle Jack was the quiet type who liked his little me-time breaks. One day, he stops his solitary smoke breaks, always insisting for someone to accompany him, else he wouldn't go down alone. He's a heavy smoker, so him being able to hold it sometimes for an entire night was unusual. Only much later, he told us why. One night, he was on his solo break, leaning against the railing with a cigarette in one hand, when he felt a tug at his elbow. He turned and saw nothing. He was alone. Shrugging it off, he took another long drag on his cigarette, when suddenly something grabbed him hard by both shoulders and yanked him backwards, as if to pull him into the sea. Uncle Jack reeled but managed to catch himself from falling, his cigarette falling into the dark waters churning below. He was so shaken by that ordeal that he never took solo smoke breaks again on that job. That's not all. A number of the guys reported seeing a figure, sometimes white, sometimes dark, lurking around the cellar deck. They said they'd seen it sometimes hanging around in a corner, or climbing up or down the staircase to the sea deck. The cellar deck was a favourite resting spot for our crew because it was cool, shaded, and relatively quiet, so perfect for taking a short nap during breaks in the work. Two of my friends, Bob and Mac, were taking a nap one night at the cellar deck. Bob suddenly awoke with this terrible itching all across his face and neck, suddenly disappearing as soon as he got up. He looked over at Max sleeping soundly next to him and woke him up too, afraid there might have been a chemical or gas leak. Max said he didn't feel a thing, but to be safe, they checked out the area and found nothing. Settling back into their nap, this time Mac was awoken with the same itching all across his face. Waking up Bob, again they found nothing and went back to sleep. This time, both of them felt that crawling, itching sensation again. This time, they knew it was something else. When they told me the story later, I laughed and mentioned the figure that the others had seen in that area, saying maybe that they felt was the figure's long hair dragging across their faces. The look in their eyes as the colour drained from their faces said it all. It was exactly the feeling of long hair tickling their faces. We have a belief here that in places with little to no human presence, the other entities tend to make their homes there, and we humans become trespassers on their territory. That theory was soon proven to us. At the time I was on that platform, the rainy season had just begun. Heavy torrential downpours that would happen every morning without fail, sometimes up to several times a day. Thunderstorms at sea are a thing to marvel at, an approaching solid wall of rain and darkness, which soon envelops you on all sides until you cannot see anything beyond a couple 100 meters. When the storms hit our tiny platform, you couldn't even see the gigantic plume of flame from the mother platform's flare stack, which normally lights up the sky for a mile or so around. And yet, despite the raging storm that beset us on all sides of our tiny little platform, up on the top deck, it would be dry, as though the storm parted around the little platform, held back by whatever entity resided there. The watcher on the platform. A wellhead, aka Christmas tree, is a set of valves and manifolds sitting atop an oil or gas well that serves to cap the well and provide a way to control the flow of the oil or gas out of the well, in a nutshell. One time, I was on a 3-week-long job on a large mother platform, where we set up our equipment on a small adjacent satellite platform connected to the mother platform via a bridge. I was on the night shift with one other guy. Part of the job involved recording the readings every hour from a pressure gauge on the wellhead of the well we were working on, well number 12. This was one deck below the top deck, in what we call the wellhead bay, where the wellheads are clustered very tightly. You have to squeeze through the various pipes, manifolds, instruments, etc. to reach number 12. All went well at first, nothing out of the ordinary, except it was a bitch to take the gauge reading since it was a tight squeeze. Me being smaller than the other guy was the natural choice for the task. Only thing is, during the night at least, it was kind of weird in the wellhead bay. There were maybe only a total of 5 people on duty at night, including 3 platform guys sitting in the control room of the mother platform, so there's hardly anyone around at all. 99% of the time, I would be the only guy down there at any time. However, I would always get a weird feeling, like there was someone nearby. Hard to explain. Plus, I'd get goosebumps whenever I stood in front of the pressure gauge at wellhead number 12. A couple of times, I thought I heard someone calling my name, but there was no one around. One of the day guys gave me a cryptic warning one evening during shift handover. Don't go down to the wellhead bay alone at night. He wouldn't say any more than that. But come on, what could I do? There were only 2 of us, and one had to stay up top to monitor the equipment at all times. So I just took it in good faith that he meant it from a safety and buddy system perspective, and assured him we'll be fine. Didn't think much of it at the time, and the job went on fairly well. A week later, back in base, I was chatting with a couple of colleagues, and the topic of fatal work accidents was brought up. One of them said he was on a job where a young greenhorn got himself killed installing a pressure gauge on a wellhead. He'd forgotten to check for pressure in the wellhead before loosening a bolt. And when the bolt was loosened, it shot out and hit him square in the forehead, killing him instantly. Ever since then, many people had reported feeling uneasy at the spot where the young guy had died. I asked, where did this happen? On the platform, right in front of the pressure gauge of wellhead number 12. My maternal grandma, who I was really close to, passed away in 2003. When she was alive, she was very fond of using creams like Deep Heat and Counter Pain, so she always had this lingering scent of menthol wherever she went. She regularly stayed at our home, other times staying with one of my numerous uncles or aunts. After she passed away, we gave away her old clothes, cleared out her old medicines and creams, etc., since nobody else in our house used them. Anyway, fast forward to a few months later. I was having dinner with my parents and siblings when we were talking about old grandma, how we missed her and joked about how she always had that menthol smell around her that we no longer had in the house. Then suddenly, my mum went quiet. My dad went quiet. Then the rest of us went silent. Finally, my mum asked, "Who's been using Deep Heat cream?" We all looked at each other, and we all knew that none of us had used it, or even had it in the house. And in that instant, we all knew that all of us had caught a whiff of that familiar, old, comforting menthol scent. After a few minutes, though, it was gone. It was as though Grandma had popped by to let us know she missed us too, and she was still with us. None of us felt any fear in that moment, just an odd sense of comfort. A few times after that, we would sometimes catch a whiff of the familiar menthol scent, and we'd know Grandma had maybe popped by to check in on how we were doing. So when my dad was young, his dad, my grandfather, let's call him GP, worked for a bit as a lumberjack. There was a young guy who lived in the same village whom my dad knew. A pretty cocky guy, so let's call him C. One day, C decided to join the lumberjacks to earn some money. According to my dad, C was pretty cocky and loved to run his mouth, making snarky comments about stuff, always acting like a smart aleck when the other guys tried to teach him stuff. Things went all right for a while, but one fateful day, C met his comeuppance. The crew was in a tropical rainforest, cutting down trees. As they finished cutting down a tree, they stopped for a water break in the heat and humidity of the jungle. C wandered off to take a leak. It wasn't long before he came running back, calling everyone to go with him. He brought them to this massive tree where, nestled amongst the gnarled roots, rested a human skull. The guys immediately hushed up and decided to leave things be. Nothing good could come of disturbing someone's resting place, and especially under a massive old tree. There's a belief that really old, huge trees have guardian spirits residing in them. Hence, extra care must be taken when felling or working on one of these. C, the smart aleck as always, laughed it off and called everyone else superstitious old fools, saying if they cut this tree down, they'd get good money for it. The guys were having none of it. GP told C to cut it out and come back to work. They still had logs to cut and prepare for hauling. Seeing nobody pay him any attention, C decided he needed to pull a stunt to prove his manliness. Whipping out his Traz snake, he called out to the guys, "Watch this," and took a piss at the foot of the tree, aiming carefully to make sure he got the skull full blast. "How was that? How's the taste of my piss?" C asked smugly, looking at the skull. "Tastes a bit salty," came the reply. Whirling around, C laughed. Who said that? Only to see the rest of the crew, disgusted at his antics, already trudging back to work. Thinking nothing of it, he shrugged and went back to join the guys. The fun really started the next time C took a piss. "Tastes a bit salty," the voice would boom in his ear. At first, C thought it was one of the guys playing a prank on him, although everyone denied saying or even hearing anything. "Tastes a bit salty," the voice would boom in his ear again. Every time C took a piss, in his home, at work, at the coffee shop, no matter where he went, the faithful piss connoisseur would follow. It didn't take C for long to realize that he had ticked off the wrong being, and that this being had attached himself to him. C ranted and screamed at everyone around him, desperately trying to prove that it was someone playing a mean prank on him, but the voice was for his ears only. Eventually, though, C went mad. The whole village had heard of his exploits and chastised him for it, even going so far to use C as an example to teach their kids to respect nature and the supernatural. C desperately tried to fix the problem, seeking out temples, spirit mediums, and the like, only for them to either tell him that they couldn't do anything about C's new friend, or refusing to help and that he deserved it. C eventually took his own life. A bit salty to the end. Tastes a bit salty, wouldn't you agree?